Today our presentation is on exit planning. Diane Ross Hansen, president and founder of Exit Planning Strategies. When is the appropriate time for a business owner to start planning your exit? Ideally before you even start your business. You ought to start with the end in mind. So I think Diane will bring great insights, and welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff, for the invitation. You know, I have, my office is in Oakdale. I reside in the White Bear Lake area, and I'll be the first to admit that we often choose Hudson to recreate in. So it's a pleasure to be able to come to this side of the metro area versus the west. And likewise, I've became aware of Jeff and the Club E through Rick. I attend the Minneapolis meetings quite often, not religiously, but quite often, and Ibida Partners as well. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here. And in fact, as I look around the audience, I recognize that there's a number of my colleagues who I consider to be trusted advisors within my network, who could just as easily be up here sharing this information, and in fact, I may call on them. But could I get an idea of who the advisors to the business owners are in the room, just as a FYI? Okay? And how about the owners themselves? Any? Okay, excellent. Great mix. I wanna start, if I could, with with a story that, if any of you have heard me speak before, this may be duplication, but it was an impactful enough situation that I want to share it with you. I had begun working with a construction company. There were two brothers who owned the company, and I began working with them in the mid-90s on their business continuity plan, as well as the development of their retirement plan for their employees. And in 2005, the brothers had contacted me and said, Diane, we'd like you to come on in. I said, absolutely, happy to do so. I thought this was just an annual review type of a meeting. And what it ended up being was we're getting out of this business, how can you help us? And while the reasons, the rationale behind it, this is two brothers who started the company 17 years earlier, who had grown it from the garage into a 65-plus employee firm. And in and of themselves were still probably, I would say, in their mid-50s, had hit the wall. They grown very tired of dealing with changing tax laws, dealing with managing people, missing all of their children's events for those 17 years, and once again had finally said, we're done. And in fact, we're contemplating and going the direction of a liquidation. Asked whether or not we could be of help. And it was when I speak of we, it was myself, their accountant, and their attorney at the annual meeting. Make a long story short, they were not a candidate for an outside transaction because they were not willing to stay at all. They also hadn't taken the time to develop a management team that would stay with the company operating it, which many outside buyers, third-party buyers, be it strategic or financial, are interested in. Their children were not yet in their mid-20s, so they, as a potential successor likewise, was not an option. And as I mentioned, they really didn't have a key management group that they could go to ask if they were interested. So what ended up happening is they did. They sold their equipment at auction price and basically took 10 cents on every dollar on their financial statement. After 17 years in the business, took 10 cents on every dollar for their equipment only. 65 people lost their jobs. the community lost an avid supporter, and they walked away. As devastating as that was, or it made that situation, that client situation, made me think, how does something like that occur? And the answer over time came down to 3 very common reasons. The first is that, like so many owners, these 2 brothers were so busy running in the business that they forgot about the importance of working on their business. They never took the time to create a market for their stock or think beyond their own operation of that company. And we'll talk about that. That's what you'll see. The other thing that dawned on me when I was thinking about this and reflecting on it is that none of the advisors to these owners never pressed, including myself, never pressed, and I don't want to use the word press, but never asked these owners, what's the end game? You're building the company, you're being successful. By all rights, you have every reason to be proud. What's the end game? That was one of probably the most significant events that caused me to about face and start exit planning strategies in 2005. To be able to address this planning issue outcome agnostically. To be able to help owners understand what their options are and proactively plan for it. What I hope to share with you in our brief period of time today is a process that we utilize in helping navigate what for many owners is probably their most significant financial event of their life. And that is transitioning ownership, paying the least amount of taxes possible. By the way, in your handout today, you've got a lot of information. If you miss any, don't worry about it. I thought about copying my slides. I said, no, if you want them, there's a evaluation form in there. Just indicate so, and I am happy to send them. Or if a question comes up, likewise, feel free to jot it down there. To begin with, the reality is I always tell owners, you will exit your business, voluntarily or involuntarily, horizontally or vertically. And at that time, most owners are interested in trying to maximize the value of their life's work. Whether it be for personal, family, estate, legacy goals, most are interested in attempting to try to maximize the value that they're going to receive. And the question becomes one, is that transaction to be something that you're going to have control over, or is something going to control it for you? The reality, we've all heard it, of 9.5, and I think this number is conservative, of 9.5 privately held businesses in the United States. Cornell University says over 70% of them are going to be exiting within the next 10-year period. Institute of Independent Business says that on average, most owners' net worth, 75% of their net worth is tied up in an illiquid entity. That's the average. And yet, Price Waterhouse says only 22% of owners have any sort of an idea of how it is they're going to get out of the business. Which means they're being reactive versus proactive. They're paying more taxes than they need to on the transaction. They may be undervaluing their business. What exit planning is about is basically educating the owner on options, helping them make more informed decisions, and basically take control of the process. That's what we're going to talk about. So how do you do it? This is actually something that was developed by an organization called Business Enterprise Institute. John Brown, he's an M&A, merger and acquisition attorney in Denver. He trademarked this 7, and when I was introduced to it, it resonated. Not only with me as an advisor from the financial side, but also the owners that I spoke with. And we're going to touch on In my work with Vistage, I don't know if you're familiar with them, CEO Roundtable, we cover what we're going to cover today, and I promise I won't keep you here for 3 hours, but we cover this in 3 hours, and today we've got basically about 30 minutes to get through it, so bear with me. We start with identifying the objectives, identifying what business and financial resources the owner has. What you will notice in this information is that our approach is not the soft side. We're talking about the nuts and bolts, the spreadsheets, the financial aspect of exit planning, just as a disclosure, if you will. Identifying the personal resources available, how do we maximize and protect business value? Ownership transition to an outside party is one option. Ownership transfer to inside is another, we'll talk about that. Business continuity, and then finally personal wealth and estate planning. A lot of times owners will say, what do you think we should do? What should our strategy be? My answer is always the same. I have no idea until I understand what the owner's objectives are. And by the way, the other rule that I live by is that this process is one that requires an advisory team to accomplish. And for those colleagues in the room, each one of your expertise is necessary in some aspect of the work that I and other advisors offer owners. You'll notice, however, the owner at the center. Depending upon the needs of that situation will dictate which, at minimum, the CPA, the attorney, at minimum, banker are required. And then depending upon, I always say, you know, exit planning or getting out of the business is a unique issue, and one that your existing advisors may or may not be qualified to be able to address. But the important thing is that you've got a coordinated effort, that everybody's on the same page working for the benefit of the owner, resulting in an action checklist. Step one is identifying the objectives. When does the owner want to be out? And when I say out, is that out the door or is that 1 foot? Are we talking about a gradual departure of responsibility or a reduction, or are we talking about shutting the door and not looking backward? Sometimes when I ask a business owner, when would you like to be out? I hear a pause. He looks at his watch. Says maybe like yesterday. That's not a good answer. When would you like to be out? What is that figure that the owner needs in order to enjoy financial independence? Regardless of the business, what is it going to take from a monetary standpoint for you as an owner to be able to enjoy financial independence? We have to know that. I have to know that. And lastly, who are your desired successors? Let's forget about money for a moment, if we could, which is the only time you're going to hear me say that probably. But if you had the choice, who would you like to see this business transition to? Those 3 questions are where we start. And if we can't answer them, we'll work at getting answer. And the other thing I'll mention is that a lot of times what keeps owners from engaging in this process is the feeling they have to have exactly the right answer and they'll never veer from it. And the reality is that's not reality. Let's just get preliminary conclusion or consensus and move forward. The last I've seen, and again for my colleagues in the audience, there's really only 4 exit options. You can either sell to an outside or third party, be it strategic or financial. You can sell to an inside party, which is your family members, co-owners, key employee. You can sell to all employees through an employee stock ownership plan. You can retain ownership in the company and just remove yourself from a day-to-day. I have a lot of owners that opt to do that. Or you end up, like the clients I mentioned at the onset, you liquidate the business. Liquidation is not necessarily a bad thing if that's what you as an owner understand. And we have a conversation between the difference of what I call a transferable business and a lifestyle business. Lifestyle business is one that supports an owner's standard of living. And when they're finished with it, they shut the door. Nothing wrong with that, unless it comes as a surprise. So these are the basic, which do you want to do? Much of it depends. How quick the owner wants to be out, how strong the need for a legacy is, how qualified the internal buyers might be, what the cycle in merger and acquisition and sale and acquisition is like. Much of it is dependent upon those factors. So once we know what the owner's objectives are, timing, who do I want to transition to, what's the dollar amount, we need to assess the business and personal financial resource. Remember, the Institute said that on average, 75% of the owner's net worth is tied up in their business. So we have to know what that value is. For the CPAs in the room, when we talk about valuation, I always say we can have 5 different values for a business on the same day, depending upon who's doing the valuation and for what purpose. You've got a range from calculations, assessments, to valuations, to appraisal. And depending upon what the owner's objective are, will dictate which of those you're going to access in this planning process. So when I say valuation is in the eye of the beholder, it really is based upon it's not going to dictate price, but you've got collateral value. The IRS has an opinion about what your business is worth. The market may have an opinion about what your business is worth. You as an owner may have an opinion, right or wrong. So again, valuation is important. And the reason I say it is because, too, by going through this process of valuation, which your CPA, your CDAs, your brokers, your investment bankers can assist with, it helps the owner understand the drivers that impact value negatively and positively in order to prepare. Because once we know what the business is worth and the other assets, now we can compare, is there a gap to what the owner needs to be financially independent? So valuation, very, very important. And again, actually 80% of the ownership is in net worth of the typical business owner, 80% in the private business, another 8% in the real estate, often owned, hopefully outside of the business. So we've got 88. With this level of dependency, this is why this process is so important. The other thing, by the way, it's also one of the reasons why owners hang on to their business as long as they do, because of the financial dependence, not only on the net worth and balance sheet, but on the annual income. 75 to 100% of the owner's standard of living is tied up in the business. It makes it hard to allow the reins to loosen, to allow others to kind of experiment running the business on your dollar. Protecting and maximizing the business value. Protecting the business value against unnecessary taxation in a transaction. I always say to an owner, it's important that you understand, through the help of your advisory team, whether you have an offer unsolicited or solicited, and you've got a figure on your table, in a letter of intent or whatever the case is, to understand what that offer or price is going to mean the bottom line. What are you going to be able to deposit into your bank account? And while there are many issues that dictate that, and more expertise in the audience than I have, I can say that from the planning perspective, there's 2 primary issues that are going to dictate how much tax is paid on the transaction or transfer. The first is the structure of your organization. Are you a C Corp or are you an S Corp? Are there any C Corps in the room?
One of them companies.
Okay. Okay. Jeff is raising his hand. And I'll talk about that. The other main aspect of how much tax is paid on the transaction is whether or not your sale is a sale of stock or a sale of assets. Knowing what the result is going to help the owner be able to identify the strength of the offer they have and negotiate price. we'll talk about value drivers in a moment. In a C Corp, bottom line is this. This is an example of a C versus an S Corp under an asset sale. If we've got a company that worth fair market value of $4 million with a cost basis of $1 million, so we sell for $4 million, we've got a $3 million gain. With a C Corp of an asset sale, we're going to pay tax once at the corporate level, I'm assuming a 40%, and then once those proceeds come into the owner's going to pay capital gain tax, let's say at 20%, to net $2.24 million. In a C Corp asset sale. If I'm a sub-S or a flow-through, I avoid that double taxation at the corporate level and again at the individual level. So I'm only paying at the individual level on a pass-through entity. And on an asset sale, we're hoping it's a capital gain, not inventory, etc. We pay capital gain at 20%, we net 3.4. On a sale price of a $4 million business, that differential of $1.2 million that hits the bank account is substantial, in my opinion. So structure of organization is huge. Now you might say, well, no problem, right? If I'm anticipating a sale, I'll just switch from a C to an S. What's the big deal?
Built-in gains tax.
Built-in gains. IRS, of course, understands that game and figures, no, you can't do that. Is it still a 10 back? 10, 5. 5 look back. Thank you. Now, the other thing is asset versus stock sale. I don't know if, again, many of you are familiar with this, but as a business owner, if I say, okay, I'm ready to sell, I've gone out, I've worked with a broker or a banker, I've got 4 or 5 different offers on the table, but 3 of them want to buy assets versus stock. What does this mean? Why do they want to buy assets? Well, the reality is that, first of all, a buyer can go and pick and choose what assets they want. They get a step up in cost basis. Let's say we're an equipment company, we've got, if I'm buying your assets and I'm able to purchase it at market price and re-depreciate that asset all over again, that's an advantage to me as a buyer. I like that step up in cost basis for the purpose of depreciation. That's an advantage. Huge one is if I'm buying assets, I'm not buying any of those potential litigation issues you've got hiding in the closet from work that you did 10, 12, 15 years ago. As a buyer, that's a huge advantage. Now the disadvantage to a seller is that if you're buying my assets, yes, if I held on to those assets for 12 months or longer, I'm paying capital gain. That's a good thing. Except for inventory, non-compete agreements. If I took accelerated depreciation above straight line, I'm going to recapture that as ordinary income tax. A seller much prefers stock for a couple of things. First, I'm guaranteed capital gain if I've had it for over 12 months. I'm transferring all those potential liabilities that may be back, and I'm avoiding this built-in gain. When the seller or when the buyer is insisting on an asset sale, oftentimes that can be a point of negotiation. Because again, the point is that as a seller, important to know what we're going to end up with. So when we talk about minimizing taxes, there are many things, but structure of both the corporation as well as the sale is important to be aware of. Value drivers. This is the difference between a transferable and a lifestyle business, by the way. A transferable business is focused on EBITDA. They have operating system. They have operating systems that support sustainable cash flow. They have operating margins at or above industry average. They've got a diversified customer base. They've got growth strategies. And oh, by the way, they've got a strong management team. In my opinion, all of those are important, but one of the most critical is the development of this management team. Does anybody employ what they would consider to be a key employee incentive or retention plan within their organization currently? Okay, I won't single you out. Okay, When we talk about motivating, retaining key people, incentive and retention plans, in my opinion, are one of the most critical design factors that an owner should focus on. And again, this is a topic in and of itself for a session. Let it be said that there's two basic types of incentive retention: stock-based, cash-based. Cash-based are your deferred comp, phantom stock, stock appreciation. Stock-based are stock options, stock bonus. Either one of these is very effective at motivating and retaining key people. But I always tell owners to be very careful before they go the route of stock. Because giving stock prematurely to the wrong person makes litigation attorneys rich. Let me give you an example. I had an owner, again, two unrelated owners. They actually working with a manufacturing company. They had been bugging the owner for years saying, you know, we want to move into this ownership. You know, can we count on that? And the owner kept saying, yeah, I'm working on it. And every year these two people would come back and say, okay, so what's the plan? Yeah, I'm working on it. Finally, these two said, we're going to start our own manufacturing. We think, A, we've got the relationship with our vendors. And we think we can do this better. So they left and they started a competing firm. But before they left, they knew they needed this one project manager that they could not do the competitive business without. We'll call him Joe. They went to Joe, they said, Joe, we're going off, we think we can do this better, but we really like to have you come with us. And for that, we're going to give you 10% of the company, which at the time was nothing. But he went. It was enough of an incentive. The manufacturing company grew, eventually, actually, believe it or not, put the old manufacturer out of business. Grew to the point where now Joe had gone from the project manager to a head of the estimating department. He had like 45 people underneath him. He was an excellent project manager. But he was a miserable human resource person, people manager. In fact, he was abrasive. His department was, finally, a couple of that department went to the two equal owners. They each had 45%, they gave Joe 10. They said, you know, we can't work with Joe. He doesn't respect our opinions. He doesn't ask our opinions. It's like working with a dictator. You know, we got to do something or you're going to lose half of this estimating department. So the two majority owners went to Joe, said, Joe, you know, this has been a great run. Thanks for everything you've done, but you know, we'd like to buy your 10%. What do you think Joe's response was? No, thank you. And in fact, remember I said he was a little bit of a, how did I describe him? Prickly. Immediately went out and hired an attorney. You know, ended up still coming into the office. Long story short, after a 2.5-year legal battle, the majority owners were finally able to buy Joe's interest. And by the way, it was at 3 times market just to be able to get rid of him. The moral of that story is to be careful before you award key people stock. Because what you might find is that those key people might in fact appreciate cash rather than ownership and minority ownership in a privately held business. Second thing is if you're going to give stock, make sure you've got a buyback provision that stipulates what the purchase price will be. And please don't underestimate the rights of a minority owner. Not only access to financials, but even what you're taking out of the company in perks. I think it's called duty of loyalty or care or something like that. So again, cash-based is actually what we find 88% of the time. Criteria, there's an article in your folder that talks about these. If you're going to establish a key employee incentive, please at least have these 4 design variables. The first is have a performance standard. How is an award going to be earned? rather than just how we're doing at the end of the year, it's going to be tied to a specific attainment of some financial benchmark, right? Profits increase by X amount, we'll put X amount into a pot for the benefit of our 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 key people. That's definable. That's measurable. It takes the owner out of the hot seat, where they've got key employees that have become accustomed to bonuses at the end of the year. If you tie it to the attainment of a benchmark, you can communicate that. It takes the owner out. Has to be substantial. What's substantial? Today's marketplace, this, and I'm not talking about a seasonal bonus. I'm not talking about a across-the-board profit sharing. I'm talking about motivating and incenting your key group. When I say it has to be substantial, the formula should, industry standard, 25% of salary. Potential, if not more. Less, you're not going to get the type of, perhaps, production performance. Loyalty. Deferral investing. So often owners have some type of incentive plan, they give it all outright. The problem with that is that 2 months after that bonus, that employee is not, not as satisfied as the date of the bonus. Some amount of that benefit, annual benefit, should be deferred. I say at least 50%, subject to a vesting schedule. And then finally communicate the plan. Again, this is a critical piece, even for companies who have a plan, to just revisit it and make sure that they've got the variables required in order to make it a win-win. The reality is that if designed correctly, increased profits are what's going to finance this plan, not cash that's already been accounted for. Step 4, third-party sale. If this in fact is the direction that an owner intends to go, it is where we bring in the business broker, the Sunbelt, the investment banker, depending upon the size of the company. Again, this is not an area of expertise for me, but if the owner is saying, absolutely, this is what I'm building this business for, we need to bring that expertise to the table and not, a week or a month or even a year before the anticipated sale, but ideally 2 to 3 years to help the owner get the company ready. I read something, I think it was Pepperdine. 30% of businesses that are for sale will terminate without a close. I don't know if that's accurate, but I think that's kind of high. And the reasons, they're a variety, but here's the 3 biggest, and my Sunbelt colleagues can confirm. Valuation gap between what the owner thinks the company is worth and what the offer is huge. Fluctuating earnings is another that differentiate from what the buyer is actually expected. And unrealistic seller expectation. So if outside transaction is the route you're going, absolutely bring in the advice of the expertise and quite possibly have a backup plan. The backup plan is the internal sale. BEI did a study probably in 2012 that said they surveyed owners. 41% were considering an internal transition, 24% to children, 29% to third party, 6% to other. Why do owners transition inside buyers? Anybody want to take a stab?
It's easier. It's easier than selling it on the market.
I would disagree. Outside sale is actually quicker, more likely to have cash up front. But you know what? You're right. If you've got time and you've got a loyal group of people, it can be. Sean?
Psychology?
Psychology? Absolutely.
Motions.
A lot of times owners say, hey, these people, I was going to say these guys, these people have helped me build this business. I want them to be a part of the future of this business. They want to give them the same shot at financial security they had. They think it's the only way to retain their legacy. But here's the second question. What's the biggest problem with internal transitions? Anybody want to take a guess that doesn't know the answer immediately? What's the biggest challenge? Yep.
They don't have any money.
Exactly. They don't have any money. No, not only do they not have any money, but they're not eligible. They're not bankable to go to a bank, right? So you as an owner, you've built this entity. Why is it that you're not interested in giving it away? Here's the issue with internal transitions. They have no money. Typically, the strategy is very tax inefficient. And the owner's got to get their head around this idea of discounted stock price. This, by the way, a session in and of itself. Here's what a lot of owners do. They'll say, okay, we'll develop an incentive plan. We'll pay these key people, the successors, a bonus. The successor is going to give up 40% to the IRS before it hits the successor's pocket, right? Now the successor is going to turn around and buy stock from the owner. At best, owner is going to pay capital gain, right? Another 20%. So that $1 that's come from the company has lost 40% at the key executives level, another 20% at the sellers level. So over 60% of that $1 has gone to our silent partner. Yes?
You forgot about the state tax, there's another thing.
Here's the bottom, I shouldn't say bottom line. When I work with owners on internal transitions, which is my niche area, I will have them understand that discounted stock price, for as long as it's available, that's being challenged on the family transitions, is a good thing. Does that mean that you're going to sell for up to 30% off fair market value? No. It's going to mean that you're going to take a 30% discount on the stock sale, but you're going to make up that 30% with tax-deductible payments from the business. Deferred compensation for you, the owner. Highest defensible lease payments on the real estate. Royalty fees, consulting fees. That's how you get that money and make it more affordable, at least until they gain enough ownership to then be able to go out and be bankable. Okay? Internal transitions can take a number of different gift stock bonus depending upon family transitions. Oftentimes we'll take advantage of that. Installment buyout, where they go out, they borrow, they pay the bank or the seller. Two-phase transfer, that's where the owner sells a gradual interest in the company until the point that your internal buyers are bankable. Then they're able to cash out the balance. ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, in the right situations is a tremendously tax advantage strategy. Old company, new company is another technique that's used to facilitate an internal transition, often in the construction industry, manufacturing, where basically we're just separating the capital structure of the business from the operational aspect of the business, and the owner and the successors are sharing profit in the operating entity. Again, white paper, further information. If there's an interest, please feel free to indicate so. Again, a subject in and of itself. Which is best? A lot of it depends upon how quick the owner wants to be out, how much cash they need, how much of a gap between what they need to be financially independent and what the value is worth, the tax implications, the capability of the successors to run the business. Step 6 is business continuity. This is what happens if the owner gets hit by the proverbial bus. And that's the easiest, quite frankly. I don't mean to be morbid. But what I challenge owners to ask is, if something were to happen to you, and you weren't able to go into the business the next day, a death occurred, stop for a moment and think. Think about the stakeholders in your business, and think about what it is that you would need what they would need in order to wrap things up. We're talking about employees, we're talking about vendors, we're talking about your bank, we're talking about your attorney, your accountant, co-owner. Questions are, who's going to operate the business? If I have a co-owner, is the co-owner going to be required or have the option to buy my stock? Where are they going to come up with the money? How's my spouse going to get income? Is the bank got personal collateral on any outstanding loan or line of credit? All of those issues require addressing in the business continuity. Stay bonus, if you're a sole owner and you're dependent upon key people running the business, a stay bonus says if something happens, we're going to guarantee your salary plus 25% payable quarterly for 18 to 24 months following my demise, in turn for you staying with the business and operating it until my heirs can figure out what they want to do. Simple concept. Can make the difference between employees running for the door. Buy-sell agreement, I say, single most important business document, stipulates what's going to happen with the stock, who has the first right to purchase, what price, what's the term, and it avoids the stock going from any unintended parties. Chris Mercer wrote a book. He's a valuation. Buy-sell agreements, reasonable resolution or ticking time bomb. When there's a triggering event that occurs, a death, a disability, you can almost be assured that there's going to be friction. The buy-sell agreement hopefully will prevent that. What are the problems? Outdated valuation, outdated document. Often they're drafted and they sit in a drawer, collect dust. Triggering events. They cover death, disability, but what about divorce? What about bankruptcy? What about illegal act? What about a forced sale? A Texas shootout. You've got a minority owner that says, you have an outside offer to buy the business, and your minority owner says, why would I do that? I got a great gig here. I'm not interested in selling. Well, if you've got a triggering event that says that those minority shareholders have to agree, that solves that issue. Without one, it's stalemate potential. Life insurance coordination. Life insurance is what funds the shareholder's ability to purchase stock. Here's what I see. Company is the owner of the insurance policy, so that if the owner dies, death proceeds come into the company uses that money to redeem the stock. Very often what I find, not often, occasionally, I've got two owners, 50-50 owner, company is the owner of the policy, and the owner's spouse is the beneficiary of the life insurance. That's a problem. Because that co-owner has an obligation potentially to purchase and has no cash. So now we go to the terms. Anyway, this is a big issue. Personal wealth and estate planning. Make sure the exit plan is coordinated with the estate plan. Absolutely estate taxes, if it's an issue we want to take a look at. Maybe the owner has charitable bequests. Fair versus equal. Active versus non-active. Family businesses. Want to treat everybody equally, right? It's a recipe for disaster. Cliff and I did a session on this in the EBITDA Partners. If all of the children were given right to come into the business, some chose to, some didn't. Why would we then equalize the ownership and place the responsibility on the active child to continue to make it profitable? Especially when they don't have control. Lots of ways to get around that. Cash is always the great equalizer. If the parents have other assets that they can bequest to the other children, great. If they don't, again, you have flexibility with use of insurance. Incremental transfer. Using the estate planning to correct balance. We've all heard the statistics. 30% of family businesses make it to generation 2. 12% make it to generation 3. 4% make it to generation 4. Why? Parents hang on too long, they impede growth, they're dependent financially, and the successors don't have the cooperation or capability to carry forward. Process in the meeting session, figuring out what the owner's objectives are, gathering information, advisory panel, come together, take a look at what designing options are, presenting a preliminary plan. Here's a couple of different options. Here's the advantages and disadvantages of each. Which do you like? Final plan, and then most importantly is implementation. That's the process. I know I've done a lot of speaking in a short period of time. Before I wrap up, Are there any immediate questions that anyone has or dying to ask? Yes?
You mentioned timing and selling your business and
Yes.
things, but in reality, if you're not making money,
Yep.
it's the worst time in the world to sell your business, because it isn't worth anything.
Correct.
So if you're planning an exit strategy, the first thing you have to plan is how to make your companies profitable,
Yep,
because otherwise you got nothing to sell.
yep,
So sometimes, even though you'd like to be working on it, you have to work to get those companies profitable.
absolutely.
And then you work to sell.
Absolutely. And there are advisors that do just that, that'll help you build and maintain profitability. And it's absolutely worth the exercise. How do you do it? Again, it's not something that's going to come naturally to an owner. Outside, and that's the thing with this, is that having a team that's experienced in all aspects. Remember, I had that advisory team. One of those people addresses exactly what you just said. Yes?
The other, the most important thing is dumb luck.
Dumb
You
luck.
have to pick up the right time. Timing is everything. Like if
Absolutely.
you had a business and you wanted to sell it before this last financial crash, it was worth probably 5 to 10 times what it was 2 years later. So everything is not always in your control. You can have the best plans and they still might not.
Absolutely. Dan?
So to drill into that on timing, the best time to sell to maximize the value is during a peak market. And we're in a peak market right now, just like it was in 2005, 2006, and 2007. So that's another consideration if you're really looking at it scientifically.
Even though it may not be ready, because if those general cycles are 6 to 7 years, for an owner who, let's say, is at 65, you're going to be 72 before that opportunity comes back again. May or may not be worth waiting, but great point.
One more question?
I appreciate your attention. Hopefully something you've learned from.